If you think your wife's phone is just for Candy Crush, you're the candy getting crushed. My name is Nick Russo, and I'm a fire inspector for the city of Cleveland. 39 years old, built like a guy who used to carry people out of burning buildings, and apparently dumb enough to miss the fact that my own house was on fire. The firehouse on Maple Street smells like diesel fuel, burnt coffee, and the kind of honesty you only get from people who run toward danger while everyone else runs away. That Tuesday morning, I was sitting in the break room with my crew, trying to pretend my marriage wasn't circling the drain. "You look like someone pissed in your cornflakes," said Ray Martinez, our captain. Ray's been my friend since we were both rookies, back when I thought fighting fires was the most dangerous thing I'd ever do. Turns out, trusting your wife is way more hazardous. "Just tired," I lied, sipping coffee that tasted like it was filtered through a gym sock. Tito Kowalski, our resident comedian and human wrecking ball, laughed from across the table. "Tired? Brother, you look like you've been hit by a truck, backed over by the same truck, then the truck apologized and hit you again." Lisa Chen, the sharpest tongue in the department, didn't even look up from her newspaper. "Let me guess. Wife trouble. They get that distant look, start protecting their phones like state secrets, suddenly develop mysterious evening activities." I nearly choked on my coffee. "What makes you think—" 20 years on this job, Nick. I've seen that exact expression on half the married guys who come through here. Your wife's acting weird, isn't she? The thing about firefighters is they're observant. You have to be when people's lives depend on noticing what's wrong before it kills someone. Lisa had nailed it in one guess. "Erica's been different lately," I admitted. "She reconnected with some college ex on social media. Claims it's just normal, healthy closure, mature boundaries, and all that psychological bullshit." "Oh, hell no," Tito groaned. "The ex-boyfriend reconnection. That's like saying you're just going to have one beer. Technically possible, but we all know how it ends." Ray leaned forward. "What kind of different are we talking about?" I thought about the past 3 weeks. Erica had always been protective of her phone, but lately it was like she was guarding nuclear launch codes. She'd gotten jumpy when I walked into rooms, started taking calls on our apartment balcony with the door closed, voice dropping to whispers. She hides her phone now, used to leave it lying around, but now it's glued to her hand. And she's developed this ritual where every time this guy calls, she immediately goes out to the balcony, closes the door, talks for 30, 40 minutes at a time. "How often?" Lisa asked. 3 times a week, minimum. Always the same pattern. Phone rings, she checks the caller ID, gets this weird smile, then disappears outside. The room went quiet, except for the distant sound of trucks being maintained in the bay. These people had seen enough domestic disasters to know where this story was heading. "You hear any of these conversations?" Ray asked carefully. That was the part that had been eating at me. 2 nights ago, I'd been getting a beer from the kitchen when I heard her voice through the cracked balcony door. The apartment's layout meant sound carried if you knew where to stand. "I caught part of one," I said. He asked when they were going to see each other again. She told him as soon as I left for work, she'd text him. The silence stretched longer this time. Tito actually stopped eating his donut. "Brother," he said finally, "that's not closure, that's coordination." Lisa folded her newspaper with sharp, precise movements. "Nick, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. When's the last time you came home unexpectedly during the day?" "I don't know. My schedule's pretty regular. Leave around 7:15 for morning inspections, usually back by 4 unless there's an emergency call." "That's your problem right there. You're predictable. If someone wanted to plan around your absence, they'd have it easy." The idea hit me like a slap. Erica worked from home 3 days a week as an HR manager for some tech startup. She knew my schedule better than I did, always asking about my route, which buildings I'd be inspecting, whether I'd be back for lunch. I'd thought she was being caring. Turns out she was gathering intelligence. "What should I do?" I asked. Ray exchanged a look with Lisa. "First, you need proof. Not suspicions, not gut feelings. Actual evidence. Because if you're wrong, you'll destroy your marriage over paranoia. And if you're right, your marriage is already destroyed," Lisa finished. "You're just finding out about it." That afternoon, I drove to the electronics store on Euclid Avenue. The clerk was maybe 22, with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested he was either new to the job or genuinely excited about surveillance equipment. "I need a security camera," I told him. "Something small for inside an apartment. Home security, absolutely. Burglary's a real problem these days. What's your coverage area?" I thought about our apartment layout. 1-bedroom place on Balcony Lane, living room with a clear view of the front door and kitchen. If someone was visiting during the day, they'd have to use the main living space. Just need to monitor the living room and entryway. Something discreet. He showed me a camera the size of a smoke detector. This model has motion activation, cloud storage, smartphone alerts. You can monitor it remotely, download footage, even get real-time notifications when someone enters the space. Perfect. Expecting trouble? I thought about Erica's whispered phone calls, her careful tracking of my schedule, the way she'd started asking detailed questions about my daily routes. Let's just say I want to know who's been visiting my home while I'm at work. That evening, I installed the camera in our living room, positioning it to look like part of the existing smoke detection system. Erica was in the bedroom, video chatting with her best friend Mona about some influencer drama. I could hear them laughing about someone's fashion disaster. Just adding some extra security, I called out when she asked about the ladder and tools. Good idea, she called back. You can never be too careful these days. The irony was thick enough to cut with an axe. 3 days of camera footage told me everything I needed to know about my marriage, and none of it was good news. Brandon Carter, that was the ex's name, first appeared on my surveillance feed at 7:47 a.m. on Thursday. 23 minutes after I'd left for work. 37 minutes after Erica had kissed me goodbye and wished me a safe day. The camera captured him using a key to enter through our front door. Not knocking, not being let in. He had his own key to my apartment. I sat in my truck outside the Henderson building, supposedly conducting a fire safety inspection, watching the footage on my phone. Brandon looked exactly like what you'd expect from a guy named Brandon who drives a BMW and calls himself a business consultant. Gym-built, expensive haircut, the kind of confident swagger that comes from never having to carry a hose up 4 flights of stairs. The video showed him making himself comfortable in my living room, checking his phone, then walking into my kitchen like he owned the place. 15 minutes later, Erica emerged from the bedroom wearing a robe I'd bought her for Christmas. She kissed him. Not a friendly peck. The kind of kiss that makes it clear you're watching 2 people who've been intimate recently and plan to be intimate again soon. Then she made him breakfast. Eggs, bacon, toast, orange juice served in my favorite coffee mug, the one from the firehouse that said, "Cleveland's bravest." She never made me breakfast. I was lucky if there was coffee in the pot when I left for work. I downloaded the video file and kept watching. Friday's footage was worse. Brandon arrived at 7:52 a.m. and didn't leave until 2:30 p.m. 7 hours. The camera caught them on the couch, her head on his shoulder while they watched something on my television. It caught him answering his phone while walking around my apartment in his underwear. It caught her bringing him lunch on a tray, the kind of domestic attention I hadn't received in months. But Saturday's footage was what convinced me I wasn't dealing with an emotional affair or a moment of weakness. Saturday, I'd been called in for an emergency inspection at a warehouse fire. Erica knew I'd be gone all day. The camera showed Brandon arriving at 9 a.m. with an overnight bag. An overnight bag in my apartment while I was working. I called in sick Monday morning and spent the day reviewing 3 weeks of cloud storage footage. The pattern was clear and systematic. Brandon had visited 11 times in 21 days, always during my work hours, always staying between 4 and 8 hours. He had a key, knew the building's back entrance, and had clearly been given detailed information about my schedule. The most damaging footage was from the previous Tuesday, when I'd supposedly been conducting inspections downtown. The camera showed them in my living room, Erica sitting between his legs while he massaged her shoulders. They were talking about me. I couldn't make out all the words, but I caught enough. Doesn't suspect anything, and too trusting for his own good, and we just need to be careful until... Until what? Until they figured out how to end my marriage? Until Brandon left his wife? Until they decided I'd served my purpose? That afternoon, I drove to the building management office to talk to Mr. Sokolov, our landlord. Viktor Sokolov was a 68-year-old Russian immigrant who ran his properties like a military operation. Every lease violation was a personal insult. Every unauthorized modification was an act of war. "Mr. Russo," he said in his thick accent, looking up from a stack of paperwork. "What brings you to my office? Problems with apartment?" "Not exactly. I need to understand something about our lease agreement. The clause about additional occupants." Sokolov's eyes sharpened. In his world, additional occupants meant unauthorized tenants, which meant lost rental income and insurance complications. Lease is very clear. Only persons named on agreement may occupy premises. Any additional residents must be approved in writing, subject to background check and additional deposit. "Why, you ask?" I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot from the security footage. Brandon, clear as day, using a key to enter the apartment. "Someone's been staying in my apartment without my knowledge or consent. Multiple times per week for weeks. Extended visits, has his own key, appears to have moved personal belongings in." Sokolov studied the image, his expression darkening. This man is not on lease. Definitely not. Wife gave him key without permission? Appears that way. This is serious violation. Lease allows immediate termination for unauthorized occupants. Also potential trespassing issue if he was told to stay away but continues to enter. That was exactly what I'd hoped to hear. What would you need to proceed with violation notice? Documentation, proof of unauthorized access, evidence of extended stays, demonstration that lease terms were violated knowingly and repeatedly. I thought about the 11 visits captured on camera, the overnight bag, the spare key, the casual way Brandon moved through my apartment like he lived there. I can provide that. Good. Bring evidence tomorrow. We discuss options. That evening, I sat in my truck across from our building, watching Erica through our apartment windows. She was on the balcony again, phone pressed to her ear, animated conversation that lasted 43 minutes. When she came inside, she was smiling. My phone buzzed with a text from her. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. She was 12 feet away from me, standing in our kitchen, texting me lies. I drove to a 24-hour diner and ordered coffee I didn't want while I figured out my next move. The evidence was overwhelming. The lease violation was clear-cut, but I needed more than just proof of the affair. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. Brandon Carter, business consultant. I ran his name through LinkedIn, Facebook, public record searches. What I found made the betrayal even worse. Brandon wasn't separated or divorced. He was married to a woman named Janelle Carter, a nurse at Cleveland Clinic. They had 2 kids, lived in a house in Lakewood, and according to his social media posts, were working through temporary difficulties in their marriage. Erica wasn't his new girlfriend, she was his side piece, and I wasn't the only spouse being lied to. I stared at Janelle Carter's Facebook profile. Married 15 years, mother of 2, posting hopeful messages about working through challenges and keeping faith in difficult times. She had no idea her husband was spending 3 days a week playing house with my wife. The diner's fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows on my coffee cup. I thought about Erica's careful questions about my schedule, her insistence that she and Brandon were just reconnecting as friends, the way she'd started working from home more often to increase productivity. Every conversation we'd had in the past month was a lie. Every kiss goodbye was a countdown to my departure so she could text her lover. Every I love you was cover for an elaborate deception that had turned my marriage into a part-time job. But now I had evidence, and I had a plan. Tuesday morning, I told Erica I had a full day of inspections scheduled, including a complex warehouse facility that would keep me busy until evening. She kissed me goodbye at 7:10 a.m., wished me a safe day, and asked me to text her when I finished work. Love you, she said, already reaching for her phone. Love you too, I replied, knowing it would be the last time I'd ever say those words to her. I drove around the block and parked where I could see our building's back entrance. At 7:31, Erica's phone lit up. At 7:33, she was on the balcony. At 7:47, Brandon's BMW pulled into the visitor parking space he'd been using for 3 weeks. I gave them 30 minutes to get comfortable, then I went home. The security camera had captured their routine perfectly. Brandon let himself in, Erica greeted him with a kiss, and they settled onto the couch with coffee and what looked like leftover Chinese food. They were relaxed, intimate, completely at ease in my living space. I used my key to enter quietly through the front door. They were so absorbed in their conversation, they didn't notice me until I was standing in the living room doorway. Erica saw me first. The color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. Nick, she stammered. You're supposed to be at work, I finished. Yeah, I got that impression. Brandon had the decency to look embarrassed, but not embarrassed enough to stop sitting on my couch in my apartment wearing my spare Cleveland Browns t-shirt. This isn't what it looks like, Erica said, which might be the stupidest thing anyone has ever said while sitting next to their lover in their husband's living room. I pulled out my phone and connected it to our television. Really? Because I have 3 weeks of security footage that suggests this is exactly what it looks like. The first video began playing on our 55-inch screen. Brandon entering with his key, Erica greeting him in her robe, the breakfast routine in my kitchen. I'd edited together a greatest hits compilation. 11 visits, intimate conversations, domestic activities, and one particularly damning clip of them discussing my work schedule to plan their next meeting. You bugged your own apartment? Brandon asked like he was the victim of some elaborate setup. I secured my own apartment against unauthorized intruders. The fact that it captured your little domestic fantasy is just good luck. Erica was crying now, but they were angry tears, not remorseful ones. You had no right to spy on me. I had every right to monitor my own home. What I didn't have was a wife who respected our marriage enough to avoid fucking her ex-boyfriend in our living room. The video compilation continued playing. I'd included audio where possible, including the conversation where they discussed how trusting and clueless I was, and how they just needed to be careful until they figured things out. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, turning off the television. "You have 24 hours to remove yourself and all your belongings from this apartment. Brandon, you have 24 hours to return my spare key and remove any personal items you've stored here. After that deadline, I'll file trespassing charges for any unauthorized entry, and I'll provide this footage to support the charges." "You can't just throw me out," Erica protested. "I live here. My name is on the lease." "Your name is on the lease. His isn't. The lease specifically prohibits unauthorized long-term guests. Mr. Sokolov is very interested in discussing this violation with you." Brandon finally found his voice. "Look, man, this got out of hand. You didn't mean to get caught? There's a difference." I walked to the closet and pulled out Brandon's overnight bag, which I'd discovered hidden behind storage boxes. I dumped the contents on the coffee table: clothes, toiletries, prescription medications, phone charger, and a spare set of car keys. 3 weeks of evidence suggests this was pretty intentional. Erica stared at the scattered belongings like she couldn't understand how they'd gotten there. "How did you find—" "I live here, remember? It's amazing what you notice when you actually look." Brandon stood up, trying to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. "We're adults. We can work this out reasonably." "You're absolutely right. Here's the reasonable solution. You leave my apartment, return my key, and never come back. Erica, you have until tomorrow evening to decide whether you want to try saving our marriage or continue your relationship with a married man who's been lying to both of us." That got their attention. Erica looked confused, but Brandon's expression shifted to something approaching panic. "That's right," I continued. "I know about Janelle. Nice family photos on Facebook, by the way. Does she know you've been playing house with your college girlfriend while she's working double shifts at the hospital?" Brandon's confident facade crumbled completely. "You don't understand the situation. I understand that you're married, you have 2 kids, and you've been using my wife as entertainment while you work through your temporary difficulties. What I don't understand is how either of you thought this would end well." I picked up Brandon's overnight bag and handed it to him. 24 hours. After that, this becomes a legal matter, and I promise you don't want your wife finding out about your extracurricular activities through a police report. Brandon took the bag and headed for the door, but Erica grabbed his arm. "Wait," she said. "We need to talk about this." "No," I said firmly. "You need to decide what you want, but you don't get to negotiate terms while you're actively cheating on me in my own home." After they left, I sat in my living room and called Ray. "How'd it go?" he asked. "About as well as you'd expect. Denied everything until I showed them the video evidence, then tried to minimize it, then tried to negotiate like this was a business deal." "What's your next move?" I looked around the apartment that had been systematically violated for 3 weeks. Every surface they'd touched, every meal they'd shared, every intimate conversation they'd had in my space felt like a contamination that would never fully wash clean. I'm going to make sure they both understand exactly how much this is going to cost them. Nick, be careful. Don't do anything that'll come back to bite you legally. Don't worry, everything I'm planning is completely legal, but that doesn't mean it won't hurt. That afternoon, I drove to Brandon's neighborhood in Lakewood. His house was a modest 2-story colonial with a small front yard and children's toys scattered on the porch. Janelle's car was in the driveway. She was working day shifts this week, according to the hospital schedule I'd found online. I sat in my truck across the street, watching a woman who had no idea her husband was living a double life. Through the front window, I could see her moving around the kitchen, probably preparing dinner for her family. She deserved to know the truth. But more than that, she deserved to have the evidence to protect herself and her children when her marriage inevitably fell apart. I pulled out my phone and composed a careful message to her Facebook account. "Mrs. Carter, you don't know me, but I have information about your husband that I think you need to see. This isn't a prank or a scam. I'm attaching video evidence that speaks for itself. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but you deserve to know what's been happening." I attached 3 of the most damning video files and hit send. Then I drove home to wait for the explosion. By Thursday morning, Brandon Carter's world had officially imploded, and mine was about to get a lot more interesting. Janelle Carter had received my message, reviewed the evidence, and apparently decided that 15 years of marriage wasn't worth preserving if it meant tolerating a husband who maintained a second household with another woman. According to the public court records I could access online, she'd filed for divorce Wednesday afternoon and requested an emergency hearing to modify their temporary custody arrangement. The evidence I'd provided, video of Brandon using a key to access another woman's apartment, staying for hours at a time, clearly engaged in an intimate relationship while claiming to be working on his marriage, had destroyed any sympathy the court might have had for his position. Brandon's carefully constructed life was unraveling in real time, and I had a front row seat to watch it happen. My phone rang at 6:30 a.m., Erica's name on the caller ID. "Nick, we need to talk." "Talk about what? Your deadline is tonight." Brandon's wife filed for divorce. She's trying to take his kids away from him. She's claiming adultery and using some videos as evidence. Sounds like a personal problem. You sent her those videos, didn't you? I sipped my coffee and watched the sunrise through my kitchen window. I sent evidence of your affair to the other person being betrayed. She had a right to know what her husband was doing. You destroyed his family. He destroyed his family when he decided to play house with you 3 days a week. I just provided documentation. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Erica, you still there? This isn't over, Nick. You can't just ruin people's lives because you're angry. I'm not ruining anything. I'm revealing what was already ruined. There's a difference. She hung up. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. Is this Nick Russo? Depends who's asking. This is Janelle Carter. I think we need to meet. That afternoon, I sat across from Janelle Carter in a coffee shop on Detroit Avenue, watching a woman who looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days. She was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'4", with the kind of practical appearance that comes from working 12-hour shifts in a hospital. But her eyes were sharp, and her voice was steady. "Thank you," she said without preamble. "For the evidence. My lawyer says it's exactly what we needed to protect the children's interests. I'm sorry you had to find out that way." "I'm not. I suspected something was wrong, but I kept making excuses. Work stress, midlife crisis, temporary problems we could solve with counseling." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out the problem was that he was living with another woman 3 days a week." "How long had you suspected?" 6 months, maybe longer. He started asking detailed questions about my work schedule, claiming he wanted to plan family time better. He developed mysterious client meetings that always seemed to coincide with my day shifts. And he started doing his own laundry, which should have been a massive red flag. I thought about Erica's sudden interest in my inspection routes and her careful tracking of my departure times. "What's your situation now?" I asked. "Legally. Much better, thanks to your evidence. The court granted my request for primary custody while the divorce proceeds. Brandon gets supervised visitation until we can establish that he's not going to expose the children to unstable living situations. And financially? That's where it gets interesting. Our house is in both our names, but I've been making the mortgage payments from my nursing salary while he's been spending his consulting income on his girlfriend. My lawyer thinks I have a strong case for keeping the house and getting substantial support payments." Janelle pulled out her phone and showed me a text message thread. These are from yesterday, after he found out about the divorce filing. The messages were a mix of anger, desperation, and blame-shifting that painted a picture of a man whose carefully managed double life had collapsed in spectacular fashion. "He's furious with you," she said. "Apparently he thinks you've destroyed his life out of spite. His life was built on lies. I just documented the truth. He doesn't see it that way. He's talking about getting revenge, making you pay for interfering in his business. That got my attention." "What kind of revenge?" "I don't know specifics, but he's been making threats about ruining your career, filing false complaints, making your life as difficult as you've made his." I thought about Brandon's personality type, entitled, self-centered, used to manipulating situations to his advantage. A man like that, backed into a corner, might do something stupid. "I appreciate the warning. There's something else. Your wife contacted him yesterday. They're planning something together." "What kind of something?" "I don't know, but the conversation I overheard suggested they're not going down without a fight. She's apparently furious that you've humiliated her publicly, and she wants to make sure you pay for it." That evening, I called an emergency meeting with my firehouse crew. Ray, Tito, and Lisa gathered in the break room while I explained the situation. "So, let me get this straight," Tito said. "You caught your wife cheating, documented everything, gave the evidence to the other guy's wife, and now they're both pissed off and planning revenge?" "That's the summary." Lisa leaned back in her chair. "What kind of revenge are we talking about? Professional sabotage, personal harassment, legal challenges?" "Could be any of those. Brandon's lost his kids and is about to lose his house. Erica's facing the end of her marriage and potential eviction. People in that situation sometimes make bad decisions." Ray was quiet for a moment, then looked up. Nick, I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer. Is there anything in your professional conduct that could be used against you? Any corners cut, any violations, any situations that could be twisted to look improper? Nothing. I've been doing this job for 15 years. My inspection reports are thorough, my safety recommendations are by the book, and I've never had a complaint filed against me. Good. Because if they're planning to attack your career, they'll look for any vulnerability they can find. What should I do? Document everything, Lisa said immediately. Every contact, every threat, every attempt at harassment. If this escalates, you'll need evidence of their behavior. And watch your back, Tito added. Desperate people do desperate things. That night, I installed additional security cameras around my apartment building and upgraded my phone to record all incoming calls. If Erica and Brandon wanted to play games, I was going to make sure I had evidence of every move they made. I was also going to make sure they understood that destroying my marriage was going to cost them more than they'd bargained for. Friday morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Erica's supervisor at her tech startup. The second was to the building management company that handled Brandon's office space. Both conversations were brief, professional, and devastating. I'm calling to report a situation that may affect workplace productivity and create liability issues for your company, I told Erica's boss. I have documentation showing that one of your employees has been using work-from-home privileges to conduct an extramarital affair, including allowing unauthorized individuals access to confidential work materials and company equipment. I sent him edited versions of the security footage showing Brandon in our apartment while Erica worked on her company laptop, including timestamps that corresponded to her official work hours. The call to Brandon's building manager was even simpler. I need to report unauthorized use of commercial office space for personal activities. I have evidence showing that one of your tenants has been using his business address to conduct personal affairs that violate the terms of his commercial lease. By the end of the day, Erica had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into misuse of company resources. Brandon had received a formal warning about lease violations and a notice that his rent would be increased to reflect mixed-use occupancy. Their professional lives were now as complicated as their personal lives. But I was just getting started. Saturday night, Mona's big mouth became my secret weapon. Erica's best friend was an influencer with 15,000 followers and the kind of personality that treated other people's drama like personal entertainment. She was also the type who couldn't keep secrets when she'd been drinking, which made her a perfect target for some strategic information warfare. I knew Mona would be at Brennan's Pub on West 25th Street because she posted her location obsessively on social media. I also knew she'd been drinking since happy hour because her Instagram stories were getting progressively more incoherent. What Mona didn't know was that I'd positioned myself at the bar with a clear view of her table and a phone set to record everything. "Oh my God, you guys," she said loudly to her table of equally drunk friends. "You will not believe the drama Erica's going through right now." I adjusted my phone's position and kept recording. Her husband totally lost his shit when he found out about Brandon, like completely psycho. He had cameras in their apartment, he's been stalking them, he sent evidence to Brandon's wife just to be vindictive. One of her friends leaned in closer. "Wait, Erica's been cheating?" "For like months. Brandon's this super successful business consultant, totally hot, way better than her boring firefighter husband. They've been meeting at her place during the day and it was like so romantic. Like a movie, you know?" "But she got caught?" "Nick, that's the husband. He's this controlling psycho who couldn't handle that Erica was finally happy. So he secretly recorded them and sent the videos to Brandon's wife just to destroy their relationship. It's so fucked up." I kept recording as Mona continued her drunken commentary, painting me as an abusive stalker and Erica as the victim of a controlling marriage. Every word she said was being captured in high-definition audio, and every word was going to come back to haunt both of them. The worst part is that Brandon's wife totally believed the videos and filed for divorce immediately. She's trying to take his kids away just because he found someone who actually makes him happy. It's so unfair. What's Erica going to do? She's fighting back. Nick thinks he can just destroy her life, but she's not going down without a fight. She's got lawyers, she's got evidence of his stalking behavior, and she's going to make sure he pays for what he's done. That was exactly what I'd hoped to hear. Mona had just provided me with evidence that Erica was planning legal action based on false claims, and she'd done it in a public place with multiple witnesses. I finished my beer and left the bar, uploading the audio file to cloud storage before I even reached my truck. Sunday morning, I edited the recording into a highlight reel of Mona's most damaging statements and posted it to the neighborhood Facebook group with a simple caption. "For anyone wondering about the drama on Balcony Lane, here's the truth about what's been happening." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Neighbors who'd seen Brandon coming and going from my building, people who'd noticed Erica's strange behavior, friends who'd suspected something was wrong. They all started commenting with their own observations and support. Mrs. Patterson from 4B. I knew something was off when I saw that man using a key to your apartment. Erica told me he was a repair technician, but repair technicians don't stay for 6 hours. Dave from the building across the street. My wife and I saw them on your balcony multiple times, definitely not acting like friends. We wondered if you knew. Sarah from 2A. Erica asked me not to mention to you that she'd been having work meetings at home. Now I understand why. The comments kept coming, and each one painted a clearer picture of how extensively Erica had lied to cover up the affair. She hadn't just betrayed me, she'd manipulated our entire community to enable her deception. By Sunday evening, the Facebook post had been shared 43 times and had generated over 200 comments. Erica's reputation in the neighborhood was completely destroyed, and Mona's credibility as a reliable source of information was permanently damaged. But the real victory came Monday morning when my phone rang with a call from Janelle Carter. Nick, I wanted to thank you again. Brandon's lawyer tried to claim that your evidence was illegally obtained, but the recording you posted over the weekend proved that they've been coordinating their stories and planning false accusations. How so? Mona's comments about Erica having evidence of stalking behavior and lawyers ready to fight back. Brandon made almost identical claims in his court filing. His lawyer argued that you'd been harassing them and that the videos were obtained through illegal surveillance. But the recording proves they coordinated their defense strategy? Exactly, and it proves they're willing to lie under oath to avoid consequences for their actions. The judge was not impressed. What's the outcome? Brandon's request for increased visitation was denied. The court found his claims of harassment to be unsupported and potentially fraudulent, and my lawyer is now pursuing perjury charges for the false statements in his filing. That afternoon, I received a call from Mr. Sokolov. Mr. Russo, I have update on lease situation. Mrs. Russo came to office this morning with lawyer, claiming harassment and illegal eviction. She demanded I ignore lease violation and allow her to remain in apartment. What did you tell her? I told her that lease violations are not negotiable, and that bringing lawyer to intimidate landlord is additional violation of good tenant behavior clause. She has until Wednesday to vacate, or I begin formal eviction proceedings. And her lawyer? Her lawyer reviewed evidence you provided and advised her to comply with eviction notice rather than face public court proceedings. Apparently, video evidence is very convincing. Wednesday evening, I came home to an empty apartment. Erica had removed her belongings, left her key on the kitchen counter, and disappeared from my life as suddenly as Brandon had appeared in it. The apartment felt different, cleaner somehow, like a contamination had been removed. I sat on the couch where I'd caught them together and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. You destroyed my life, and I'm going to make sure you pay for it. Brandon. I screenshot the message and added it to my growing file of evidence. If Brandon wanted to continue this war, I was ready for the next battle. But first, I had one more move to make. Thursday morning, I woke up to find my truck's windshield covered in raw eggs and my apartment building's front entrance spray-painted with the word stalker in bright red letters. The security cameras I'd installed caught everything. Brandon Carter, dressed in dark clothing, vandalizing my property at 3:17 a.m. He'd been careful to avoid the building's main cameras, but he hadn't noticed the additional surveillance I'd added after Janelle's warning about revenge plans. I called the police and filed a vandalism report, providing clear video evidence of Brandon's late-night activities. Then I called Ray. He's escalating, I told him. Property damage, threatening messages, public harassment. This guy's completely lost it. What's your plan? I'm going to end this today, but I need backup. What kind of backup? The kind that ensures Brandon understands that destroying my marriage was the worst mistake he's ever made. That afternoon, Ray, Tito, Lisa, and I met at the firehouse to plan what we privately called Operation Balcony Drop. The plan was simple, legal, and guaranteed to provide Brandon with a humiliation he'd never forget. The beauty of this, Lisa explained, is that everything we're doing is technically within our authority as fire safety officials. We're not harassing him. We're conducting legitimate inspections based on anonymous complaints. What kind of complaints? I asked. Suspicious odors, potential fire hazards, reports of unsafe storage practices, all the kinds of things that require immediate investigation and can result in public safety citations. Tito grinned. And if those investigations happen to be very thorough, very public, and very embarrassing, well, that's just good police work. What about Brandon's office building? Already handled, Ray said. I contacted the building's fire safety coordinator this morning. Apparently, they've been concerned about some of their tenants' compliance with commercial safety regulations. Brandon's office is scheduled for a surprise inspection this afternoon. And his apartment building? That's where it gets interesting, Lisa said. Turns out Brandon's been subletting his office space for personal use, which violates both his commercial lease and the building's fire safety codes. When we inspect his business office and find evidence of residential activity, clothes, personal items, overnight stays, he'll be facing citations from multiple agencies. The first phase of our plan went perfectly. At 2:30 p.m., Ray and Tito arrived at Brandon's office building with official inspection equipment and a clipboard full of violation notices. They found exactly what we'd expected. Evidence that Brandon had been using his commercial space as a personal retreat, complete with a fold-out bed, personal clothing, and enough personal items to constitute unauthorized residential use. The building manager was not pleased. Commercial insurance doesn't cover residential activities, and fire safety codes for mixed-use spaces are significantly more stringent than purely commercial requirements. Brandon received a formal citation for fire code violations, a notice of lease termination for unauthorized use, and a bill for the increased insurance premiums his activities had triggered. But the real show was scheduled for 6 p.m. at his apartment building in Lakewood. Lisa and I arrived at Brandon's building with a full complement of fire inspection equipment, official badges, and a complaint form alleging suspicious chemical odors and potential fire hazards, reported by anonymous neighbors. Brandon's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted house, with a small balcony overlooking the street. Perfect visibility for what we had planned. "Mr. Carter?" Lisa knocked on his door with official authority. "Cleveland Fire Department. We need to conduct an immediate safety inspection based on reports of potential hazards." Brandon opened the door looking like he hadn't slept in days. His apartment was a mess. Clothes everywhere, empty takeout containers, the general chaos of a man whose life had fallen apart in the span of a week. "What kind of hazards?" "Chemical odors, improper storage of flammable materials, potential electrical violations. We need to conduct a full inspection to ensure compliance with residential safety codes." We spent an hour documenting every minor violation we could find. Overloaded electrical outlets, improperly stored cleaning chemicals, blocked emergency exits, and a dozen other technical infractions that would require costly corrections. But the real purpose of our visit was the balcony inspection. "Sir, we need to test the structural integrity of your balcony," I announced loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. "There have been reports of unsafe modifications and potential collapse hazards." Brandon followed us onto his small balcony, where Lisa began an elaborate inspection of the railing while I tested the structural supports with official-looking equipment. "Mr. Carter," I said in my most official voice, "I'm afraid we've identified several serious safety violations that require immediate attention." "What kind of violations?" "Unauthorized modifications to the balcony structure, improper weight distribution, and evidence of activities that exceed the balcony's safe weight limits." I pulled out a clipboard and began reading from an official-sounding list of violations, each one more ridiculous than the last. Excessive storage of personal items, unauthorized installation of decorative elements, failure to maintain proper clearance for emergency access. A small crowd had gathered on the street below, drawn by the official fire department vehicles and the commotion on Brandon's balcony. "Sir, I'm going to need you to demonstrate the proper use of this balcony for safety assessment purposes." "What do you mean?" "Sit in that chair, please. We need to test weight distribution and structural stability." Brandon sat down, clearly confused but not wanting to argue with fire department officials. Lisa handed me heavy-duty zip ties. "Standard safety restraint procedure. We need to secure the subject during structural testing." Before Brandon could object, I'd zip-tied his hands to the chair arms. "Safety first." "What the hell are you doing?" "Conducting a thorough safety inspection. Tito, initiate the water pressure test." Tito appeared with a fire hose. "Testing structural integrity under adverse weather conditions." The first blast of cold water hit Brandon square in the chest, soaking him instantly. "This is assault." "This is a legitimate fire safety inspection," Lisa replied calmly, documenting everything with her camera. "We're testing the balcony's drainage systems." The crowd below had grown larger, recording everything. Brandon's humiliation was being broadcast live to social media. I pulled out electric hair clippers. "We've received reports of unsanitary conditions. We need to address the hygiene violations immediately." "You can't do this." I began shaving cheater into the back of his hair while Tito continued the water pressure testing and Lisa documented every moment. "This is harassment," Brandon screamed, struggling against the zip ties. "This is justice," I replied quietly. "You destroyed my marriage, tried to ruin my career, and vandalize my property. Actions have consequences." The crowd below cheered as Brandon sat soaking wet, partially shaved, zip-tied to a chair on his own balcony. "Mr. Carter," Lisa announced, "you have 30 days to correct all identified violations or face eviction for safety noncompliance." She handed him violation notices while Tito released the zip ties. The crowd erupted in applause as we descended. Neighbors thanked us for our thorough inspection and dedication to community safety. My phone buzzed with a text from Erica. "I saw the video. You've gone too far. I'm calling the police." I showed Ray, who laughed. "Let her call. Everything we did was within our authority. We have documentation and legitimate safety concerns." That evening, I sat on my balcony with a beer, feeling complete satisfaction for the first time in months. My phone rang. Janelle Carter. "Nick, Brandon signed the divorce papers this afternoon. Full custody, the house, everything. He's moving out of state next week." "Good for you." "And Nick, that video is already going viral. Brandon's learned his lesson about messing with firefighters." I looked out over the city lights, thinking about trust, betrayal, and standing up for yourself when people try to destroy your life. "Fire safety tip," I said aloud. "Don't play with matches if your whole life's a powder keg."